Now, a new survey by the Pan-African Research Network, Afrobarometer, suggests that Russia's image amongst ordinary Africans is relatively weak compared with other global powers. Across 38 African countries, fewer than 4 in 10 citizens view Russia's influence in a positive light, trailing perceptions of China, the United States, and international organizations such as the United Nations and the African Union. Now, the survey also finds that most Africans who are aware of the Russia-Ukraine war prefer that their governments to remain neutral, reflecting a strong reluctance to take sides in global conflicts. Well, to help us unpack what African citizens really think about Russia, global power competition, and neutrality in the international affairs, we're now joined by Dr Boniface Dulani, who's the director of surveys at Afrobarometer. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So your survey shows that fewer than 4 in 10 Africans see Russia's influence as positive. What does it tell us about Russia's overall standing amongst ordinary citizens on our continent?
Well, you have to bear in mind that Russia's influence in Africa dropped, especially after the end of the Cold War. So in the 1990s, I think Russia's influence went down. Of course, I think since the early 2000s, I think the Russian leadership has been trying, I think, to reconnect with Africa, mostly through diplomatic ties, security cooperation, as well as diplomatic engagement. But overall, I think Russia is playing catch up. And as you rightly noted in your introduction, we see that I think very few Africans really offer an opinion on the influence of Russia in Africa compared to other global powers. China, I think, leads in terms of positive assessments, with 62% of Africans saying China has a positive influence on their countries. Regional blocs like SADC, ECOWAS, the East African Community, the African Union, even other global powers like the United States, the European Union, rated positively by over half of the citizens on the continent, whereas Russia, I think only about 1 in 3 have a positive assessment of the influence of Russia in Africa.
So it's quite interesting, though, that whilst a lot of what you found suggests that Russia isn't as popular as it would want to be, but there are countries like Mali that have shown strong support for Russia. I would even say South Africa is among them a little bit. How do we explain these differences in the countries across the continent? Because some are very strongly pro-Russia and some not.
You're right. I think, Mali, about 88% of Mali citizens, like 9 in 10, have a very positive rating of Russia. Other countries really where positive assessments of Russia are, quite high, including Cameroon, where 6 in 10 got positive ratings, Guinea-Bissau, about 55% positive, as well as Cote d'Ivoire. So I think this really speaks to also the level of engagement of Russia in these countries, especially in the case of Mali. As we know, Russia has, I think, taken an active role in assisting the government of Mali to fight, the terrorists in the northern part of the country. Of course, we were unable, I think, to include the other countries where Russia is very active, especially, Burkina Faso and Niger. Unfortunately, we are not able to carry out our surveys in those countries. But looking at the case of Mali, one would expect that, the citizens of those countries might also have positive assessments. But it's worth pointing out that out of 38 countries, only 4 that we surveyed, only 4 did we find at least majorities, more than 50% holding positive views of the influence of Russia in their countries. Now, it's also important also to highlight the fact that actually a plurality of the citizens that we surveyed in these countries, 42% actually offered no assessment because they felt that they did not have sufficient information to provide to offer an opinion, whether positive or negative. So I think we might also be seeing here a reflection of the lack of information and knowledge about Russia, and that's why maybe countries like South Africa, where I think the citizens are much more informed, I think they tend to take a position. So yes, in Southern Africa, South Africa and Namibia, among the few countries in the region that have slightly more positive assessments of Russia than other countries in the region.
One wonders why Russia is not doing well. I mean, if I think about the liberation movements, how dependent they were on the Eastern Bloc, the socialist countries, the Confederation of the Soviet Union, for arms training and all those kinds of things. Is it that there's just no memory of it anymore with the young people?
Well, ironically, when you compare the youth and the elders, those who you would expect to have more of those memories of the role and assistance that was received from Russia, actually, so the youth, those aged between 18 and 35 in our surveys, that tended to have to hold slightly more positive views of Russia than those aged 56 and above. So yes, you'd think that those memories should count, but I think ultimately what we might be seeing here is the issue of recency. What is the role that Russia has been playing on the continent in recent times? I mean, when you look at China, for example, a lot of people know the influence of China, especially in terms of trade, as well as maybe visible signs of investments, including infrastructure developments that many people can relate to, and especially or even the youth. So the assessments here might not be about the history of the involvement of Russia in assisting, I think, the nationalist movements, but rather I think they might be driven more by recent, I think, investments on the continent. And again, as I pointed out, Russia kind of disengaged from the continent really in the 1990s, and now is playing a catch up, I think, with the other powers like China, the US and Europe, among others.
Um, a lot of your respondents, I believe, those that were aware of the Russia-Ukraine war, wanted their governments to remain neutral. What does that say about citizens' view of geopolitical rivalries between major powers, or is it just Russia?
Well, this was also another interesting finding, really, from our surveys. As you rightly point out, about 7 in 10 of the citizens that we surveyed in these 38 countries expressed knowledge about the Russia-Ukraine war. So there's a really wide awareness of global events among African citizens of all persuasions. And then of those 70%, 72 expressed preference for their countries really to remain neutral rather than to take sides. Again, there are some exceptions, in the countries like Mali, where perceptions of Russia are very positive. A majority of Malians would also want their country to take sides and favor Russia. But I think, generally speaking, what we're seeing here is that the African citizens don't want to be dragged, I think, and affected by wars that they have very little in terms of contributing to their daily lives. So a lot of African citizens, I think, as you rightly say, express preference for neutrality, that they should not be taking sides and be dragged into wars that might have been instigated by disagreements or indeed, ideological disagreements among major global powers, and that have very little influence in the daily lives of ordinary citizens. So they overwhelmingly express preference for neutrality.
All right, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for your insights and what this research has gleaned. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me once again.
That was Dr. Boniface Dulani, who's the Director of Surveys at Afrobarometer, helping us unpack the latest findings on African public's perceptions of Russia and attitudes towards the Russia-Ukraine war. And by and large, it seems that 4 out of 10 Africans have a positive feeling towards Russia, which means the majority, 60%, not so favorable. And I'm sure that this is something that the Russian authorities, who've been desperate to endear themselves to Africa, will find concerning. Yeah. Wonder what your thoughts are on that. You know where we are, social media platforms. Comment in there and tell us what your feelings are towards Russia and its influence on the continent. It's 8 o'clock, which means